the sun, which we've seen in the other cards. We've seen the lover card. We've seen the radiation from the sun. So the human brain is described as it's very good at being a sifter and a sieve, and it's very good at sorting and collecting, and it's very good at mimicry. And so he basically goes on to say that the serpent uses the brain in a cunning way, and that there's a level of cunning uh, that is needed to be on this planet. It's absolutely needed to have the human brain, which functions on the horizontal plane. So, but the serpent is very good at mimicking wisdom. And I love this quote that I don't know where it came from, but I wrote it in my margins. I'll read it to you really quickly. It's the idea of the serpent, the wily serpent, that there's such cunning. There can be such cunning in mimicry of wisdom that I read this somewhere. I don't know if it's Shakespeare. I couldn't find it, but that evil is so close to the truth that when Satan whispers into the human ear, it's so close to the truth that even the gods themselves lean down to listen. So are you still hearing me, guys? My connection is a tiny bit unstable. So on and on. So then we have humanity being presented as biologically the children of the serpent, the children of darkness. He talks about the Old Testament, it talks about the symbols of Moses throwing the serpent up on the cross, on the towel cross. He was leading the people, the children of darkness, the children of the serpent. But they're also the children of the light, and they also have the ability to illumine, heal, and transform the world. If they transcend the enfolded brain, the what he calls the cerebral intellectuality. So that's something he grapples with later. So that the serpent represents this cunning nature of horizontal gathering of knowledge and information. The book of good and evil, knowledge of good and evil. The Holy Spirit is represented by the dove. So the dove is symbolically above the head. It transcends cerebral intellectuality, and it's an instrument of sacred and divine magic. So then he quotes, of course, "Be ye wise as serpents and gentle as doves," which is, that's very beautiful. That really summarizes that idea. He questions the occultists. He has to always, he's always challenging the thinkers of his time. He challenges the occultists with their presentation of the serpent as the sole principle of realization of knowledge. So in the Eastern philosophy, you have the rising of Kundalini energies, which is the coiled serpent at the base of the spine, rising through the centers, that the serpent is the be all and end all of realization. The ancient priests are depicted with a cobra, a head of a serpent on the center of their forehead where the third eye is. I'm sure you've seen that, right? And it talks about the serpent through all the ages, how it's been used. And he goes on to say that you have to take in, you can't just keep it in the world of the serpent. It must break out. But the complete evolution is an intersection of the biological evolution and the spiritual evolution. And that this is a sweeping and Catholic and universal work of salvation that includes all human endeavor and the revelation and efforts of trying to transcend the cerebral intellectuality of the brain. So he goes on to talk about redemption as being two elements of redemption, which are revelation, the spiritual history of mankind as revealed from the Old Testament Lord to the New Testament understanding of I am, or the Old Testament understanding of I am, but that is in the book of Revelation, the whole of Revelation history. Operation of redemption operates through faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, and love. We can go into that. The Jungian collective unconscious is he starts to talk about reincarnation and what could reincarnation, could that explain if the characteristics of that are acquired of humanity, which are in this long haul path of evolution or progress of the dog moving back up to the Sphinx at the top of the wheel, that he thinks that these characteristics of spiritual evolution are stored somewhere else. They are stored from lifetime to lifetime in a reservoir of human experience, which Jung calls the collective unconscious, but which he says I think Tomberg believes it's more individual consciousness, but that it shares in collective consciousness, collective humanity, the collective consciousness of all humanity. That there's the race of human race history is a combination of these three continuities in evolution, which he calls the biological or hereditary evolution, the psychic or reincarnation element of evolution, and spiritual continuity, which he calls the work of salvation, called the great work of salvation. So you have destiny, will, and providence. Those three elements are what he considers to be another one of these triadic continuities or concepts that are triadic. He goes on to talk about the Sphinx representing animality and humanity, both undifferentiated animality, humanity as one big blob, and the differentiated and reintegrated animality and humanity, separated, reintegrated at a higher level of the spiral. And that's where, this gets really tricky, but I'm sure you guys plowed through all this. He goes into the, he wants to talk about animalized man and animality aspiring to humanity, which is, of course, those two elements of on the wheel of the monkey and the dog. Pre-fall and post-fall. He talks about pre-fall, which is created animality, and post-fall, which he calls evolved animality. So the Sphinx, he starts to go into the Sphinx as the prototype synthesis of the four kinds of cherubim: the ox, the bull, the lion, the eagle, and the angel or man. We know those to be the representatives of the four evangelists. The eagle, John the evangelist, and lion is represented by Mark, and the ox is represented by Luke, and the angel man is represented by Matthew. And I won't go into all that, but this is very interesting and very important part where he's talking about the inner alchemy of working with these forces. The eagle and the bull are put at the opposite poles of the vertical dynamic of willing and what's the top of that? Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. And then the lion and the angel man are on the horizontal. They're also opposed. Interesting concept here where he talks about, and again, this is like the ideas of unfoldment and blossoming and radiation. He has these concepts where he's talking about the way of contraction and expansion, like the growth of a plant, and that there's this upward narrow movement of our consciousness or understanding or being, which then blossoms at a higher level. There's a blossoming or expanding at the higher level, so that there's always this sort of gentle pushing upward, which is an aspiration on the way of the cross upward, and then there's an expansion outward. And again, I like to use the idea of the Rosicrucians used the idea of the rose. The blossoming rose was one of their essential symbols, and it's a powerful one. It's even as a symbol, the rose is a great meditation tool. So, and I was thinking about the chant that we sing sometimes: slowly blooms the rose within. Slowly blooms the rose within is trying to is a way of using the idea of plant-like development to use as an analogy to the Hermetic path of the Hermetic path of slowly growing, vertically ascending and expanding. So on and on with that. So you've got the winged bull. when you combine, the eagle and the bull are combined into the winged bull, which you've seen as the symbol of Luke. Is that right, Luke? Yeah. And then you've seen the winged lion. You see the winged lion depicted as Mark, and that's all over, the winged lion all over Venice. I mean, you see those statues of winged lions. So he goes into the four maxims which are at play here: to dare, to be silent, to will, and to know. And I used to conflate the two, like to dare to be silent. I thought it was one big phrase, to dare to be silent. But it's to dare, which is moral courage, to be silent, which is to cultivate depth and height on the narrow way, to reject superficiality. To dare is to cultivate moral courage. To will is the asceticism of the way, which is you have to use your will in order to force your way upward. You need to be renunciate. You need to renunciate the animal or bestial side of things. And then to know is the angel. The angel is the higher transcendent understanding, transcerebral understanding of man. So you have man and angel, and then the angel represents that intuitive knowing, to know. Okay, intuitive knowing from the higher realms. So it goes into that deeply. Now, what he comes to right here is very interesting, which is what he calls, he really goes head on to the Sphinx. The Sphinx is the combination of these four animals, but what do they point to? And it's a very ancient symbol. The symbol of the Sphinx precedes Christianity by quite a bit. It's found in the deserts of Egypt. It's archaic, and he calls it the last enigma. And he calls it, what this is all pointing to in the symbology of the card and the Sphinx on the wheel is what he calls the quinta essentia, the fifth essence. That these four animals of the Sphinx are pointing to the fifth essence, which is what makes the Sphinx live and breathe in us in the principle of the cross. So the fifth essence is what he calls new Adam, the new Adam, the reintegrated and redeemed man. So this is achieved through the spiral of living through tradition and reincarnation. This is what he says, that the idea of reincarnation is important because he believes that the entire book of the tarot, the entire book of these images, and the sacred book of Thoth, which comes to us from Hermes Trismegistus, believes that the origins of the tarot are reincarnated or reborn and revivified from the ancients through the symbols of the cards. And the cards are, he makes his argument that tarot is medieval. These cards are medieval in origin. They are not from pre-antiquity, but the sacred book of Thoth is, and the symbols have been and are enfolded from this ancient wisdom. And it's because he goes into the story from the Kore Cosmo, the Greek Hermetic treatise, where Isis is talking to Horus, her child, and describing what Hermes' mission was on this planet. That Hermes made a prayer over the teachings that he inscribed in the emerald tablets, that they not decay, that these teachings never decay through the ages. So he magically inscribed them in a region between heaven and earth. This is just amazing. I think this is a beautiful image. That's what Tomberg calls the transcerebral region. It's not in heaven, it's not in earth, it's in this space to which the soul evolves and aspires to attain knowledge of this place. So this is the reality of the Hermetic path across time. It's what he calls the totality of things. So the tarot is what he calls the invisible prototype, and the function and mission of the tarot is to evolve the soul to this original prototype. So hence, he gives these practical exercises to keep it real for the soul. The soul has to keep this real, has to keep it alive. It is never going to be as simply a metaphysical system of thought. And this is where he critiques Plato and says, Plato, he took it into the realm of ideas and left it there. But what Tomberg says is that, I love this, the concept of the whole world is only peopled by individual beings. Only through individual beings do ideas live and exist through us and in relationship to us, through individual beings. So that's kind of where I came to an end with this. But I would love to hear your thoughts now. Thank you.
I have a couple questions on the image. One that is just intriguing to me is you have this wheel, and in the middle of the wheel is like a handle. The handle's outside the picture, so you can't see it, but it looks like that's what would be the force that turns the wheel. Are there any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I noticed that too. What do you guys make of that? Because he doesn't talk about the handle at the center of the wheel, which would be a tool for torquing it, moving it. Interesting idea, interesting question. The very word that it's a handle, to me, that implies the practical nature that you can grasp a spiritual exercise and move the wheel. Just my first thought.
Yeah, and there's some outside force that moves the wheel, something other than the dog and the monkey. They're holding on, looks more so.
Yeah, they're holding on for dear life, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, looking at the monkey's arms too, it's preventing the wheel from spinning.
Oh, really? That's interesting. You have to look at that image again. John, I'm curious about your meditations on this. Did you come to anything yourself on this letter? Oh, you're muted.
A very great deal of puzzlement, and so I was very grateful for what you were saying. One thing I wondered was, would Tomberg himself have been helped if he had made use of the imaginal realm? Because he seemed to be saying that these intermediate realms are only temporary and personal things, whereas if we regard the imaginal realm as being a connecting and initiating realm rather than simply a way of making abstractions.
Very good. I think that's really astute, that the imaginal realm would correlate to this realm between heaven and earth.
I'm so glad you think that's astute, because I don't think I've got anything else very much astute to say.
That's a really interesting thought, because we talk about the imaginal realm a lot. That's kind of our modern way of talking about this, at least through all the metaphysical books that we've been reading. There is just one beautiful quote that I want to share. With respect to Hermeticists, they are called, or should I say, condemned, to live neither for the day of earth nor for the day of heaven, but rather are immersed in the night, in the profound darkness of the mystery of relationships between heaven and earth. The thinking which unites heaven and earth, which is immanent equally in every earthly phenomenal structure and every celestial noumenal entity, is that which is the vision and comprehension of the totality of things, as the power to reveal it and show it. Beautiful quote. But it's a place of almost being condemned. It feels like almost like purgatory. It's between heaven and earth that the Hermeticist walks between worlds. Just like shamans. Shamans are described as they are walkers between worlds.
Well, I think you just explained why I've always been challenged by the Catholic purgatory concept, because I don't think I've ever believed in it. I feel like we're walking it. It's been, it's been sort of it's the friction or the tension in existing in that type of thought. So I never thought about that. I think you just answered that question, which is cool, because a lot of, purgatory doesn't make sense to me in a lot of ways. And it's a very strong Catholic belief. So they're always praying for people in purgatory. But if they'd walk into, this here, the tension would be here and real, rather than something of an afterlife or an afterthought.
Michelle, will you describe purgatory as you were taught it?
Actually, there's a whole course that they just put out for purgatory. The way I understood it was, it's like the unfinished business, like if you have your sin nature or whatever you need to come to realization of in our own natures, it's a position, if I understand it right, it's the position of, going from death before you enter the levels of heaven. There's several levels of heaven. And the scripture mentions the several levels of heaven. So it's a matter of everybody, I suppose, goes to purgatory. If based on Catholics, everybody goes to purgatory. But then I was talking to a priest one day and he said, well, people that suffer abuse and different things, they go right to heaven, because they've suffered deeply here by the hands of others, so I believe it's a soul cleansing, a heart cleansing, and a realization that God exists to some extent. You're completely pured before you walk into heaven.
It means purgation, right? So it's a realm of purgation, purification realm.
And purging, like whatever you haven't finished on your walk.
The Catholics don't allow for the idea of reincarnation, though, which is where I have a real problem, because to me, reincarnation explains a lot, where my mind just short circuits when I just think about it all being in these distinct realms that are so rigid. I think it's a lot more permeable than that, and a lot more interesting, and a lot more mysterious, and a lot more cumulative over mass amounts of time.
Well, what's interesting about that thought is, I think it's the word, because they do believe in ascended ones, and they do believe in the communion of saints, and they do believe in all these beings. I mean, I remember being little, we've always gone to funerals, even as babies. And so, they'd say, well, geez, your relative is now ascended. You can always talk to your ascended one. They're always around you. So there is a sense of reincarnation into an ascended being, but it's not, I think it's a word issue. I don't think it's a concept completely. I don't know if it's I don't sense it's a reincarnation into a higher level. So as an ascended one, but I think the word reincarnation just was so Eastern, because I look at it as a form of reincarnation. If I'm sort of walking from this realm into the imaginal realm, I have sort of reincarnated to the next realm, right? In a sense, I mean, I've transitioned to the next realm. So I just wonder if it's more of a, because if I start talking about ascended ones and ancient ones to Catholics, because I don't practice much Catholic right now, but if I talk to Catholics about that, they start to agree. But if I mention the word reincarnation as, coming back to this earth as someone, that's where that gets really foggy. And so, like, when you talk about reincarnation, how are you seeing reincarnation being? Is it, go ahead.
I'm really interested in hearing what the people here conceive of reincarnation as, because I have my opinions, but
well, I didn't know if
that's interesting what you're saying about the ancient ones and ascending in the realms. And if you're all Christians, I mean, how do you deal with this issue of reincarnation and tradition and revelation, which are all kind of connected in the Hermetic path here.
Thought of reincarnation is not just moving upward as an ascension, but an opportunity to grow back on earth. That soul has an opportunity to return to continue the task back on earth. So it's not just, in my belief, a movement upward, although that would certainly be part of it, but there's a more of a totality of fullness of being able to, to come back and work some more. How about others?
I didn't get to read this chapter, but in when I talk about ascended ones too, we're talking about a new earth. They're talking about a different realm. It's not about coming back to this earth, but a next earth that will be where we continue. Like, for example, babies that have been aborted, babies that have died, they still all exist and need to be raised. They're being raised in a different realm or something like that. But it's a continuation of working. It's not an ascended one sitting on a throne just doing but it's a continuation of working something out. So we just never stop. But it is a new earth, though. It's not this particular earth.
Even Edgar Cayce had these, when he would go into a trance, the information he was given was that the souls were in different human bodies here on this earth.
So there are different individualities on this earth. They're still individualized.
Yes.
So to me, I like what Tomberg's talking about here, the idea of reincarnation as a source of eternally rebirthing, resurrecting. And he's talking about these teachings being reincarnated. I think that's really interesting, because that means literally these teachings cannot just be codified in books or in a monument or in a religion. They have to be reincarnated. They have to be resurrected in living beings. And that has to be transmitted through living, incarnate beings. That's a very beautiful idea to me. I mean, even just thinking about it as just the idea of being a student of religions or just being an aspirant to try to become more spiritually evolved. The idea that these things, we actually have to consume them. And like I say, we take the teachings and we have to chew on them. We have to practice them. We have to integrate them totally into our lives for them to live in us so that we can walk the walk. So, and I love the way he describes that that's, we're trying to be saints. When we're trying to be saints, what are we trying to do? This is what we're striving for, which is living heaven on earth, the principles of heaven on the earth, being a bridger between these kingdoms of the earth and heaven.
And for what you just said too, you just helped clarify. When I'd say, because I'm really not on the game right now about explaining, but when it said ascended ones, it doesn't mean that they depart. They're here. We can talk to our ascended ones. So when you're talking about, this material and this teaching coming in, and we're walking that out as saints would walk this out. There's ascended ones, meaning that there's souls and beings constantly in our realm here that we can talk to and we connect to. And so based on what you're saying, that I would agree with, because I can't tell you how many people, even people brought up Catholic, that are now looking into, when you start to study other religions, you start to broaden a lot of this, which is really cool, because that's what they're saying, is that the ascended one doesn't mean that they leave. The ascended one is here. It's just that they're not here in physical body. And so, and I don't know if you're talking about the transfer into a physical body, as Dori just said, but here's an example. A woman, she writes to her husband every day, talks to her husband every day, and she believes that he's around. So one day she asked him, she goes, I haven't seen you in a while, and I haven't heard from you in a while. Where are you? And he said, well, He said, you know, you're okay now. I have other business I need to do. I have other things that have been given to do, or other people I have been given assignment to. And, you know, she explained this whole thing over a lifetime. She's now 85 years old. So it's been interesting. So I'm not sure about the physical form I'm not sure about another soul taking a physical form, but I do believe there is a lot of persons and beings around us that are helping us through this.
Yep. Tomberg says it's all individualities. They're all individualities. The great chain of being, it's getting back to that chain of being.
And then then ultimately we go into that chain as well. You know, we just continue that same chain. So, you know, you got another generation that's going to pick up this book. Well, I may not be here in person, but I'm sure going to be part of the process. I don't know if I want to come back in person, to be honest.
I think it's just amazing, though, the idea that the Jungian idea that he brings up, that these are symbols, these are, we unpack these teachings through symbology, and that actually short circuits the brain, because this material, this wisdom, this understanding comes to us from a pre-cerebral realm. It comes to us from a pre-fallen, pre-cerebral realm. And so that's why the symbols of the tarot lend themselves so beautifully to this, because the symbols allow us to unpack this, not just with our left analytical brain, but with our right holistic side of our brain, which tends to see the bigger picture. And we can maybe bypass the analytical part. That's what we're trying to do with symbols in the tarot. We're trying to transcend the cerebral, the simple brain cap. We want to get beyond that and bring in new knowledge from the divine realms. And that's why it's living, breathing teaching. And so beautiful, the idea that it comes to us through this deck of cards. And the idea that Hermes Trismegistus sent out a prayer that these teachings would always work their sacred magic. In other words, these teachings would work their sacred magic through the ages and never decay. Talk about an amazing operation of sacred magic. That to me, I love thinking about that. And that's what I got from reading this the second time. That this is a spell that was cast, a prayer that was given to the divine realms to keep these teachings alive. And it's us here doing this kind of discussion and talk. You realize how rare this is. Talking about these matters really deeply, and deeply exploring them and trying to transcend our simple thinking about the way we usually think about things. It's a rare operation, and it's what Tomberg would say. This is part of the great work. So take it very seriously as a life path.
As I get deeper into, well, I haven't been able to keep up with the reading, but as I keep hearing the discussions, I will go back and make sure I read this book again. And that's exactly how I feel, because it's like when you think of Maslow's chart of human needs, you know, he tops off the point as a self-actualization. And when I was in grad school, like 15 years ago, I said, there's something missing on this chart. And he said, what? And I said, self-transcendence, because what you're talking about is that self-transcendence between here and heaven. And so Maslow stopped at self-actualization. I don't want to stop at self-actualization. That's still too human for me. You know, I want to take it beyond that.
That's where psychotherapy will take you, and no further.
Exactly. And so so that self-transcendence, the more
psychotherapy.
Exactly. Well, it is. And so when you do risk to go into this deeper, deeper study and these deeper nuggets of contemplation, self-transcendence and transcendence is really what I feel like I'm here for. And it's not necessarily, and however I'm going to come back or be back, or however it will look from this point on from my earthly death to whatever, however that's going to look, it's going to follow suit, because like you just said, this will go on for ages, the ages of the ancients of ages.
I was tremendously helped just now by Dori when she was saying that for her, purgatory is perhaps not simply a matter of getting clean, but a matter of growing. And this creates a problem because our lives are only 70 or 80 or 90 years or something like that, which actually is a short time to do all the growth that it would be nice, if we could do. And I was tremendously helped by Michelle, who was sort of, I think, challenging us to think about reincarnation in a rather more sophisticated way than simply, 50 years after I've died, I'm coming back again as, as somebody else. Because I don't think the mathematics will work. I think there are too many people and the world is too small for this sort of transaction to happen. But I think if we say that when we die, there's the opportunity for cleansing, which we all do need. There's the opportunity for growth, which we all do need. And I'm sure God is up to providing appropriate environments about which we now know absolutely nothing, except that we are aware that no matter how good we are, and no matter how old we are, we still are going to need growth and cleansing. And I think reincarnation is one way into this, but I think it has to be supplemented by a lot of alternative sort of structures too. Thank you.
I like what Tomberg said, the way he described this object of and task, which is the establishment of the Sphinx, which is by the metamorphosis, and he takes the example of these four symbols, and he'll talk about from what I think of almost like personality types, the aggression of the eagle, and the combative lion, and the raging bull, and the cold and heartless scientific man. And then he goes on and says these transformations into the Sphinx require the application of the law of the cross. So no matter what the other details are, that transformation requires the application of the law of the cross. That's the practical aspect. So that is the work of, and you think of parts of that law, of kindness and service and, your meditation, all of that. That's the foundation for me. Thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah, that really sums it up in its essence. That's wonderful. And always getting back to the eminently practical aspects of it. How do we do this? How is this accomplished? Through service to others, through disciplining yourself, through sublimating your will, aligning your will with God's will, and all of those exercises that we know. But we need to practice them. You can't just say, this is a nice idea. Oh, Plato had some great ideas too. And you could just be a dilettante with ideas and keep going on and on and on. Bottom line is you got to dig into this life and do the work. Working away from the bestial, because what Tomberg talks about the holy instincts and the bestial instinct. Again, the Wheel of Fortune, the holy instincts, which are the sublimated ones that we grow through, and the bestial instincts. I was reminded of the Gospel of Thomas, the Logian about the lion consuming man and man consuming the lion. Remember that one? That applies to this. That's directly an application of this idea, which is if the raging of lion consumes the man, in other words, if a man lets himself be consumed by ferociousness, then he becomes part of the lion. If the man consumes the lion and consumes ferociousness into his nature, but sublimates it into moral courage, ferocious moral courage. That is what Yeshua was trying to teach in that teaching, is that then you evolve. You subsume the lion into your heart and have attained the characteristics of the lion, but have sublimated the bestial aspects of the animal nature of the lion. So that's what makes this so fascinating.
Well, listening to John, you and Dori, just in this little piece right here, what came up for me was the evolution of love. We're talking about the individual is, sort of the individual walking out this process, even into purgatory, even into whatever we are to be doing after this first death here. And what keeps coming up for me is this book is drawing us into an evolution of love. And when you really think about the whole purpose of God, is it love? And so that brings us back to the cross and what you just shared. So that just keeps popping up every time we talk to about these cards. This little nugget of love just keeps, pointing out. So maybe purgatory is simply the evolution of love, a continuation.
I like that.
I'll take it.
Mark, have you got any reflections on what we're doing here with this wheel of fortune and Sphinx?
Oh man, I don't know where to start with this business, but I think that one of the things that really stood out to me and was an encouragement was just this sort of unapologetic apology that he leaves us with right at the end of the letter, in which he speaks about there being souls who must necessarily aspire to the totality of things, and who are impelled by the river current of thought which never stops flowing, always forward and always further on without cease. And that there was just, as I struggled with attempting to wrap my head around what I felt like was one of the more broad letters, and it felt like he was just dipping his pen into just a number of ink wells that I was drowning in at times. Just this encouragement at the end that I exist as his unknown friend in this challenge to aspire to the totality of things. And there was just something beautiful about the way in which he confessed this, in which he speaks about the absolute sufficiency of salvation, and his trust in that, yet being compelled to lean into the mystery. And so what my understanding of that is, I'm not really certain, other than to just sort of confess to myself that I'm in this with my unknown friend. I'm in this with you all, and at times I think we're called to dig in and lean into that mystery, and then I think there are times at which we're called to just abide in the mystery. And so I saw myself somewhere on this wheel, the involving and evolving and trusting that there's somehow a break in that circle, for me, a rest within it. So I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense, but I felt somehow in my confusion and struggling to wrap my head around some of this stuff, just an encouragement to trust that I might be on either side or both sides of this wheel, but for me, it is not a closed circuit, but somehow opening up, and hopefully I'm on my way up that spiral and not just circling the commode. So that's what I've got out of this morning. This was one that I thought many times as I was reading through it, like, I'm gonna be reading through this letter again and again, which is, yeah, it might sometimes, and at times as I was reading it, felt like that closed circuit of a cosmic hell. And I think that was one of the images that stuck with me, is this idea that a cosmic hell being a closed circuit just resonated with me coming out of this, or still feeling at times like we're in this COVID season and every day is exactly the same, and don't know necessarily which way is up or which way is down, but I know that I'm on this wheel right now, looking for Sabbath, looking for the Christ in that opening of the spiral. So thanks.
Well, Mark, that very beautiful. And I wholeheartedly agree with you that, and I just barely skimmed over the last part of the letter, but read that part. If you only just read the last 2 pages to give yourself encouragement, his defense, his apology for this path, and the treading of this path, and why it's so important for us as souls. So I love that, Mark, that you brought up that letter at the end, the very end, what he says to the unknown friend, and in defense of us, in defense of his unknown friends. Kian, do you have anything? Did you get to this? Did you get through this wheel?
Kind of enjoyed this kind of theme of, against a sort of linear view of history, of like, and as if evolution is always from ignorance to knowledge. That's what I was kind of enjoying about it. And he was kind of saying that it's more about recovering knowledge, the pre-cerebral knowledge, rather than discovering something new. It's more like a loss of forgetfulness. That's what and simultaneously, while reading this, when I started reading Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic Tradition by Francis Yates. And I was just the first chapter that was talking about Giordano Bruno as a scientist, and he was seen as a man who was bringing humans into modernity away from ignorance, when in reality his knowledge of the cosmos and science was completely intertwined with his Hermetic beliefs. So that was kind of accompanied this quite well. Then just when Mark was talking there about the spinning, or I hadn't thought of it, but when you're talking about the circles, I hadn't thought of the second coming, the Yeats poem.
Oh yeah.
And I started thinking, I hadn't thought of gyres, like of more of a violent circle, like I kind of thought, oh, this is a kind of boredom you're wrapped up in, but it could be something much more violent, and the opening is more peaceful. That was just a thought.
I love Yeats. The Second Coming is one of my favorite poems of all time. Slouching towards Bethlehem.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I never could understand if that was completely hopeless or hopeful. Is it like the most positive poem, or I don't know?
It's very ambiguous. That's the beauty of it. That's why it can be read over and over and over again, right? In different phases of your life, it means different. It comes at you from different places.
I know he was part of a Hermetic society as well. Yeah.
Oh yes, Yeats is a Hermeticist, no question. you resonate with these certain people that you encounter as artists, writers, or just in life, and you sort of know, yeah, they're in that, they have that totality of things going on.
I thought of
They're in
Phil K. Dick as well. You know Philip K. Dick?
Philip K. Dick, yes.
Yeah.
I would, yeah. I'm not that familiar with him, but yeah. The thing is, yeah, the Hermetic path is a cross section of humanity. It goes across, science fiction writers, movie directors. It's and you begin to suss it out and feel it. And when you do, it's great because you feel like there is a community and you aren't alone. And because you can feel so alone, right, Mark? I mean, I'm feeling so alone in my daily grind. I feel more and more isolated in the day-to-day grind of the COVID reality. Really, it's getting more and more restrictive for me. And I'm in New York City, which is one of the more closed circles that I've ever experienced. Everyone on the streets is in masks, everyone. I mean, so I'm just going, whoa. And so my day-to-day life is living that. And at the same time, trying to strive and open the circle into the spiral, the widening gyre. Honey is missing in action. Where
Yeah.
did she go?
Honey sent me a message, and she had workers that showed up that she needed to tend to, and she was hoping she'd be able to be back, but it sounds like we are coming to an end. And let me just say, so everyone knows this, is the capacity that we have for Zoom for these recordings will be for only 2 weeks. So it will be this current week and the last session, but there'll be just 2 letters, and then they will, however, be available. Thank you, Alice, that they'll be available on your website because they've been stored there. But Zoom is really cracking down on the capacity for storage.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes, they are on YouTube, and I do have them stored on my computer. They're not stored on my website, by the way. They are on YouTube. So hopefully they'll stay up. Hopefully they'll stay up on YouTube. That could disappear too. So if any of those particular letters, those discussions that we've had, if you want to save them to your hard drive, save them to your computer. Don't rely on these various servers to keep them for us.
And you can save the audio, of course, with less use of your bandwidth if there are some that are very important. Good. And I'm actually going to turn it off right now.
Yeah. Thank you. So I am up to date. I don't know. I watched the letter 9 again with the Hermit because that was just such a difficult one. It was very helpful